Thank you for watching NBS Face Off. I am Oscar Semweya Musoke with the Petroleum boss, Mr. Ernest Rubondo. I'm putting to you that you are over-regulating. And yes, you might say the minister has announced bids, but even that is 2017. And to the layperson, the excitement about oil started way long ago. And then we've had in our rhetoric, we are going to go to middle income. But there is no oil. And I would say it is because PAU is over-regulating.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the regulating aspect has two aspects. One, as I was saying before we went for the break, is that whether we are over-regulating or not is judged from the evidence. The companies, the results of the licensing round, which the minister announced, brought companies into the country. These companies are undertaking exploration surveys in the country. And so that means that even now, from 2017, companies outside there are seeing Uganda as an area in which they can work. They are aware of the regulation. That's one aspect.
They see, Mr. Rubondo? For how long?
That's one aspect. The other one is that there are companies that are already in the country and have been working. These companies are spending money in the country. And they have not stopped, they have not reduced, and that's evidence to you that we are doing our work. Thirdly, the importance of regulation cannot be underplayed. And here I will share with you the aspects of regulation that the Petroleum Authority does. One of the aspects of regulation is that we need to know the resources in the country, petroleum resources, where they are, how much they are, and the quality of work being done to ensure that they are recovered. The recovery is very important because if you have 100 barrels of oil in the ground and you only remove 20 barrels, you have only removed 25%. You have left a lot of value in the ground. Somebody in the country must be able to ensure that the companies which are licensed are doing their best to get out as much oil as possible. I mean, that's one area.
There's a profit motive to that. But if I say I only want to remove 20 barrels, you don't have much authority over them.
No, we do. And that's exactly what I was saying. The Petroleum Authority needs to understand these reservoirs to the extent that you can actually engage the company and say, the method you are using to produce this oil is not the best. We think you can do more.
And they would listen to you because, as you've said, they spent a lot of money, they've invested and so on. So are you able to come and challenge them and say, I'd like you to pick up on another method? And
oh yes, they do. They have the regulation, the laws and regulations behind me. And they came into the country.
Do you have an example of where you've ever advised any of them to change tactic?
Yeah, I mean, the country has. Petroleum Authority is very young. But previously, I remember there was an oil field called Waraga. The company drilled one well there, and it said, this one well has given me enough information to develop this field. And we said, no, that well is not enough. You have to drill another well to better understand this field, because you are going to underproduce this field.
And they listened to you?
Not only that, they not only listened, but they also drilled the second well. And when they drilled the second well, they actually found more oil in that field. And so what the problem we were going to have, if we had moved with their first plans on one well, it means they would have built less infrastructure required. And then when they would subsequently drill the next well, they would find that the infrastructure they have built is not sufficient. And that would be a cost to the country. So the Petroleum Authority, the regulator, has been mandated through the laws and regulations to ensure that best practice is implemented in the development of the oil and gas sector. But that's only one area of regulation. There is a second area of regulation, the costs. We have to ensure that the costs being incurred by the companies are those that are appropriate. Because as you are aware, when oil production begins, the costs the companies have spent in the country are going to be recovered from the oil. So if we allow what is called gold plating, if pens are expensive, activities are expensive, it means that the country will lose. That's the second aspect.
Yes, but again, that brings in your level of competence. I'm bearing in mind, I want to take you back to these companies investing, what we've talked about. And I also want to put it to you that maybe you're frustrating some of them, but just picking up on that line Of course. Are you? Where's your competence in that? And I know you don't want to talk about Umeme, but you are aware of their first negotiations, their second negotiations, and how it didn't look so well on reflection. If you think about the costs of units and how they've had to come down to where they are now.
I think the processes the oil and gas sector in the country have taken, the way they have gone in the country is admirable. Actually, we have countries coming to Uganda to study how Uganda has done, what it has done in the oil and gas sector. These processes include, one, putting in place the institutions that I described earlier. Two, they include training the people. Three, they include enabling these people, when they have been trained, to come here and do their work. Four, they include the engagement of these institutions with the oil companies, because the engagement with the oil companies is professional. It's true that Total has been around for a long time. It is in many countries, so is CNOOC. But if you were to attend any of the meetings that the regulator has with these companies, you would appreciate that actually the discussion is really a respectable one. There is no absence of information at all. So there is no lack of confidence.
You've kind of painted a rosy picture. But then I have Tullow. We have Tullow. Tullow literally closed down. And at the time of closing down, they were struggling. So we shouldn't just take your word that there are benefits and they're doing well when we know that Tullow was really struggling and that they toned down by the time they left. Their boss actually had already been relocated to the UK.
Well, Tullow is a private company. And as you know, Tullow was in many countries in the world. Its circumstances in the different countries could have led to what happened to them. That's one aspect. Secondly, Tullow, the phase that the oil and gas sector in Uganda is going in, is a very expensive phase. You must have heard that the amount of investment we now expect is in the range of $15 to $20 billion. The phase we are coming out of was at a lower cost. Tullow's size was most suited to the exploration and appraisal that has happened in Uganda before. The developments that we're going into that cost billions of dollars could have been a challenge to Tullow, and there's no surprising about that. And so those are some of the reasons that could have happened to Tullow. But the regulation in Uganda cannot be responsible for what has been happening to Tullow.
And the delays regarding that sale, again, I would even call them the tax squabbles. We were in a situation where another president is advising Uganda that you can allow that tax to go by because there's a lot of money that you're going to earn. Well,
the regulation we do in Uganda, and this is something I must admit we struggle with. As you have correctly said, our regulation needs to ensure that we are attracting investment. But secondly, our regulation needs to ensure that this country benefits from the oil and gas sector. And as you can understand, those two things are not completely easy to reconcile. Sometimes they do run against each other. But the most important thing we try to achieve is the sustainability of the oil and gas sector in the country. We do not want to allow anything that can be regrettable in the future to happen to the oil and gas sector.
So would that have been regrettable? Because if you say the big investment is 20 billion, 15 billion, and yet you had a big fight over 400 million.
Not at all, not at all. First of all, the reason the taxes become important is because this country has prioritized legislation and laws. Sometimes you may say, don't fight over this money, but if the laws prescribe that this activity should attract this level of taxation, you would be wrong not to implement that. And if that law has not changed, the person who is implementing the activity, your hands are tied. You can't change simply like that. And we need to follow legislation, and the countries which are best practice, who are exercising best practice in the world, actually follow legislation. Okay. So some of those things are really results because of legislation.
You spell that out so well. So when shall we have the licenses? When will final decisions be made?
Well, licenses have been granted. I think one of the challenges we have had in this country is the expectation. A lot of people thought that once commercial discovery has been announced, the next thing they wanted to see is production.
What's wrong with that expectation?
Well, that's very wrong because as you have seen, for instance, the oil in Uganda needed to be taken somewhere. Either you took it to a refinery or you exported it through a pipeline. So we needed to decide which one we do. And you remember there was a discussion because industry had a different interest of a pipeline. The country recognized the benefits of a refinery. But we needed to get a win-win for both. And in the end, you know, we had to settle for having a pipeline and also an adequately sized refinery. That discussion needed to happen.
You think so?
Second,
you don't put that down as delay?
But you can't avoid that because where would you put the oil if you didn't have any of those two facilities? That's one aspect. Secondly, you couldn't throw out the interests of Uganda of having a refinery. I mean, you couldn't just say because somebody wants to export all the oil, I should now let them go without participating. You had to come and say, please listen to me also.
Let me put in a cheeky question here. So Uganda, or should I say Ernest Rubondo, was like this poor man who does not own any car, and this person with a Mercedes is trying to give you an offer and the poor man is throwing it out. We were more like macho instead of reasonable.
Not at all. If you consider the benefits a refinery can bring to this country, it would have been extremely wrong and certainly regrettable for this country not to insist on having a refinery developed in Uganda. That would have been a big error, and it would not have been sustainable.
You stand by that today? You stand by it?
Oh, yes, definitely, because you can see the prices of petroleum products in the country on the pumps change all the time. You can imagine a situation where Ugandans know that crude oil is being produced in Uganda. They can see a pipeline taking all the crude oil for export, and they are struggling with very high costs of petroleum products in the country. Certainly that's not a sustainable situation, and no one planning for the country can allow something like that. That is in addition to the other many benefits that a refinery puts in the country. Aspects like industrialization, aspects, the opportunity of having these other things that come out of the refinery, very significant benefits.
Okay, let's stop for a break, and then I'll ask that question differently. I'll ask, so when do we get the first oil?